Our next reading comes from a book called Lives of the Musicians, Good Times, Bad Times, and What the Neighbors Thought. And I'll try to show it to you. Sometimes whoop, I'm disappearing. You can kind of see the book. Okay, I'm back. This virtual background does really weird stuff sometimes. This is going to be quite a bit shorter of a read, but it's just got some interesting insights about Bach, and it talks a little bit more about a few stories that went on in his life. Some of the things you'll hear are replicated from that in-depth reading that we did earlier, and that's okay. You'll just get a little bit more familiar with him, okay? As a young music teacher, Bach was out walking one night when 6 of his own students attacked him. They wanted an apology. Bach had called one of them a nanny goat bassoonist, someone who makes a bassoon sound like a goat. But Bach wouldn't take it back. He drew a knife in self-defense. Luckily, the fight was broken up before anyone was really hurt. All his life, Bach had trouble with people who didn't see things his way. He once wanted to quit a job, and his employer, a duke, wanted him to stay. Bach was so insistent that the duke threw him in jail. But here's the difference between Bach and the average stubborn person. During the month he spent in jail, Bach wrote 46 pieces of music that we still listen to 300 years later. How could Johann Sebastian Bach have ever thought of becoming anything but a musician? His is the largest family tree in music. Almost all of his male relatives were musicians, some 76 in all. 53 of them named Johann. I didn't know if you maybe noticed that from the last one, but you only can tell their names apart by their middle name rather than their first name. Bach's mother read him Bible stories, and his father taught him violin, sometimes late into the evening. But both parents were dead by the time Bach turned 10, and he went to live with his brother. Bach was able to support himself before he was 15. He sang and took organ playing jobs in towns that were close enough to walk to. Bach was a dedicated musician, even if it meant blisters. Once he walked 200 miles to hear the great organist Dietrich Buxtehude play. Bach spent his whole life in one small part of Germany. He was married twice, first to his cousin Maria Barbara, and after she died, to Anna Magdalena, who was a good singer and keyboard player. Anna Magdalena helped Bach in his work so much that her handwriting came to look just like his. Bach produced 1,200 musical works and fathered 20 children, although only 10 lived to adulthood. 5 were named Johann, 2 Johanna, and 4 grew up to be famous composers themselves. In his free time at night, Bach would sit in his armchair, smoking his pipe and drinking a beer, with a baby Bach on his lap as his wife and children played and sang. Bach loved food and coffee. He once wrote a whole cantata about coffee. This is part of why he is my people. Honestly, coffee. Okay. Among his most prized possessions were 2 silver coffee pots. Bach was known as a dazzling organist. His strong legs pumped the pedals, and his large hands performed acrobatics on the keyboard, and he'd even use a stick in his mouth to reach certain notes. But he wasn't a show-off. He said of his playing, "There's nothing remarkable about it. All you have to do is hit the right key at the right time, and the instrument plays itself." That's a quote we heard before. Later in life, Bach went blind, probably from copying out of his own music in poor light for so many years, and he died of a stroke at age 65. Hardly any of his music was published while he was alive, and nor did he expect it to be. Bach did not think he was writing music for posterity. That means he wasn't writing it for people in the future to perform or know anything about. He was a professional. His music had an immediate purpose. So, he would write music for the church service that was coming up the next week, and then they'd use it in that church service, and then he'd move on to something else. Not until about 100 years after his death did the genius of Bach become widely recognized. So that kind of stinks, because he died poor, and his wife died even poorer, and then they died. I mean, they just had no idea the impact that would be left just on the whole world from their music and from their influence. Okay, there are a few musical notes on this part here. Bach wrote the Goldberg variations to relax a millionaire. One of his pupils, Johann Goldberg, worked for an insomniac count who needed music to get to sleep. The count sent the most generous payment Bach ever received. Sleep's pretty important. I guess I do kind of get that. The famous two-part inventions or ideas were written for Bach's children to exercise each finger and train the hands to play independently. And that is the first Bach that I learned to play as well, probably around your age. And it was definitely the hardest thing I had ever attempted to do. I mean, it just hurt my brain and it hurt my fingers and it was frustrating and it made me so much better. It did what it was supposed to do. The Brandenburg concertos were a sort of job application to a court official of Brandenburg. Bach didn't get the job, but his concertos are today among the best-known instrumental works of the entire Baroque period. They're really, really good. Marianne Ziegler, a poet who had published 3 books, supplied the words for several of Bach's works. In working with her, Bach was ahead of his time, for women were allowed no public role in creating or performing music. So that's pretty cool. My guess is, this is just a guess, he probably only put her last name on anything, or maybe didn't include her name at all, so that then people just wouldn't know that he had used her words when he put his music together. The 2 Voyager spacecraft, launched into the solar system in 1977, contain 3 pieces by Bach, along with special record-playing equipment. So, maybe the aliens, if they're out there, can figure out how to use the record player, and they'll get to hear Bach. And it's basically NASA's way of saying, this is the best that music has to offer. This is like the top-notch, most creative, inventive stuff that human beings have offered. So here you go, aliens. See if you can do any better. I don't know. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our more textbook view of Bach. I hope that gave you some stories to give you some ideas of what he was like. So let's delve into the textbook next.